Julie, this is David. I hope it's okay if I answer via video. It's easier for me and it allows me to sort of give full answers. And this is the first time I've looked at your questions. You have a lot of questions here. You're getting my first honest reaction to them, but you have a lot here, so I'll try and keep my answers brief. When you worked with newassignment.net in 2006, what were your thoughts about the future of journalism? And I see this next one is that, what did the work with newassignment.net teach you about journalism and its possibilities that you didn't know at the time? So my thought, I think in general, in 2006 was an interesting time in journalism, similar to now, where it sort of has it had a feel of experimentation, but it was more around this. You have to imagine this is, Facebook is still young, Twitter doesn't even exist, more or less, it was sort of around this idea. There's a lot of talk around this idea of, again, my readers know more than I do, which is a statement from Dan Gilmore, and this idea that the audience can participate. And that was more or less what I focused on at the time. How was the idea of Spot Us born? What was the vision for it? The vision for it is what it was, which was this idea of crowdfunding stories, right? Getting lots of different people to fund stories. It kind of came about in part because of my work with newassignment.net, which was distributed reporting, right? Taking the workload of journalism and getting 50 people to each do 1 hour of work. Does that equal 50 hours worth of journalism work? Spot Us was different. It was one person doing 50 hours of journalism work, but that creates a financial burden. And so can we distribute that financial burden? How did you go about getting Spot Us up and running? How did you find the people, both journalists and readers? How did you make them believe in the idea and stay? There's a couple questions here about Spot Us, so let me just see here. You said that with Spot Us you experimented with an otherwise unexplored territory. What did you find? What features were you happy about, and what improvements did you see necessary? Were you not afraid that crowdfunding reporting would lead to an unhealthy imbalance in coverage if there's a danger in handing the decision rather than the consumer? What does it mean for Spot Us to become a part of American Public Media's Public Insight Network? Okay, a lot of questions here. You have let me just see how many other questions are. What about money matters? Can a startup really pay your bills? How can a concept like crowdfunding work as long as the public is accustomed to news and journalism being free? What revenue streams do you believe journalism will depend on in the future? What is the biggest challenge you faced in your involvement with startups? How did you overcome it? You've been an important figure in the development of journalism and entrepreneurship as a term. What have been the biggest lessons you've learned from startups you've been involved with? What about the new generation of journalists? Do you think we've got entrepreneurial skills to make it the profession we love? I'm sure. Do you still? So there's a lot of questions here, and if I were to try and answer all of these fully, it would probably take 45 minutes, and I don't want to leave you a 45-minute long recording. So I'm going to try and again be really brief, and if you want more, then I can try and pick some of the threads. But these are really open-ended questions, right? How did you go about getting Spot Us up and running? And what did I learn from it? So let me just try and go here. How did you go about getting Spot Us up and running? How did you find the people? How did you make them believe in the idea? So again, I got a grant from the Knight Foundation for about $340,000 to get up and running. At that point, I just sort of put out what's called an RFP, request for proposal, right? So it was like putting out this. Basically, it was saying I'm hiring, and I started talking with people, talking with designers and developers. And how did I make them believe the idea and stay? I just, pitched them the idea, told them that it was something that I wanted to do, and again, I had the money to make it happen. You had said that with Spot Us, you experimented with an otherwise unexplored territory. What did I find? Again, what I always say, at the time it was completely unexplored. Now it might not be. But I still believe that the water is warm, that crowdfunding is what I would call low-hanging fruit for the journalism industry to look at for other revenue streams, particularly nonprofits or public media. You've said that with Spot Us you experienced what features were you happy about? What improvements did you see necessary? We constantly improved. The original design of Spot Us, I almost don't remember it, but it got better and better over time. The final design I was pretty happy with. There's certain things here and there, but and what improvements did I see necessary? I mean, I think you can always find improvements. There are always features that you wanted. Um, there's always little things that you want to try and tweak, and it's really just a matter. So, to come up with a list is kind of difficult. It's not so much if there are or aren't things that you see that you want to improve. It's how do you prioritize them. That's the really, I think, important thing. Were you not afraid that crowdfunding reporting would lead to an unhealthy imbalance in coverage? Is there a danger in handing this? This I actually was not really afraid of. Or I should say, if I was afraid of it, I never experienced it. There's a lot of different answers that I have to this. People would sort of one thing that is important to keep in mind is we actually limited how much any individual could put in. So you actually did need a group of people, right? So you can't say, well, what if a really rich person who's biased phones the story, right? Like, what if a neo-Nazi phones the story? Well, we limit how much any individual can donate, so you need a group of people. And then the skeptic will say, well, what if a group of Nazis fund a story? You say, well, you need a reporter who's willing to put their professional reputation on the line doing the story. Well, what if the reporter is a Nazi? And it sort of becomes this end game of like, well, what if? And certainly we can't respond to every what if, but the point is that at a certain point it becomes so ridiculous, the scenario, that it would almost never happen. And if there are a group of Nazis with a Nazi reporter that want to do a Nazi story, they don't need my site, right? They've already gone through so much work to find each other that my site would just slow them down to try and gain some kind of legitimacy, although it would look kind of ridiculous. So, those kinds of fears and biases are not really unique to Spot Us. The fear and bias there is money, right? And I will totally admit, there's no such thing as clean money, but that's the same for Spot Us as it was for and is the case for every news organization. There's no such thing as clean money. Any what-if scenario where money is a corrupting influence can be thought up of Spot Us, can be thought up of the New York Times. It's just the case, right? What did it mean for Spot Us to become a part of American Public Media's Public Insight Network? I think it was a really good and important thing. In the end, I think Spot Us was kind of making a statement about public media, and I hope that with American Public Media, Spot Us can do something in terms of changing the way public media thinks about itself and thinks about its funding. What about money matters? Can startup really pay your bills? Yes, it can. Startups, even if they are themselves not making revenue, get funding sometimes from angel investors, right? So really rich people essentially is what is angel investors, code word for that. But if you go to Circa, for example, on the About page, you scroll down, you'll see the list of investors into Circa, and those are all people that have provided money, and collectively that's enough to pay my salary as well as other people's. How can a concept like crowdfunding work as long as the public is accustomed to news and journalism being free? So that's a really good question. You're kind of talking about what's sometimes called the commons, or the tragedy of the commons. Without trying to go into an economics lecture, think about the classic example of this is a light tower on the ocean. I forget what it's called, a watchtower, right? So there's a light tower on the ocean to shine light on the rocks. Who pays for that, right? All of the ships benefit from it, right? Everybody who reads journalism benefits from it, but none of them have to really pay for it, right? Who pays for that light tower? And that's a problem of sort of the common good. But believe it or not, there are people that will do it. Because they sort of believe in it, because they believe that they'll get something out of it, or society in general will get something out of it. What revenue streams do you believe journalism will depend on in the future? Many. What is the biggest challenge you faced in your involvement with startups? How do you overcome it? That's kind of a really open-ended question. There was a lot of different challenges that have to be overcome in a lot of different ways. There's no sort of single one that is the biggest challenge. You just have to be ready to work hard and really put your nose to the grindstone. You've been an important figure in the development of journalism entrepreneurship as a term. I would disagree with that. What have been the biggest lessons you've learned from startups you've been involved with? Again, what has been the biggest lesson I've learned? It's sort of like asking what has been the biggest lesson you've learned from school, right? I mean, it's kind of a hard question to answer, right? Like, am I talking college? Am I talking all of school? What do you mean by lessons? You mean academic lessons, life lessons? So it's hard for me to sort of answer what have been the biggest lessons I've learned from startups. Certainly, it has been a very educational experience, and I feel like I've learned a lot about myself as well as the world. What about the new generation of journalists? Do you think we've got entrepreneurial skills to make it into the profession we love? Is entrepreneurial journalism making the future easier or more difficult for journalists? So two things. One, absolutely, you guys have the skills to make it into the profession you love. And what I'd say about entrepreneurial journalism is it's a path. It is not the path, right? I don't think every single person has to be an entrepreneur. And I'd say there's two different ways of thinking about entrepreneurs. One is an entrepreneur is a small business owner, right? Someone who owns a local, Subway franchise is an entrepreneur. Although they did not invent Subway, they own the local franchise. And I think there's a sense of small business owner, entrepreneurial. And there's also the entrepreneur that we kind of think of, which is maybe a little bit more romanticized, which is like, the one who goes out west and discovers new land or invents something kind of new. And I think both are fine. And then there's, a third, which is someone who is, just works. Not everybody has to be an entrepreneur. But do I think the next generation of journalists coming up have the skills to do it? Absolutely. Does it make it easier or more difficult? It is a difficult path, but again, it's not the only path. I know you've been a journalism lecturer. Do you lecture still? I don't really lecture still. I occasionally, like what you saw, I will visit a journalism school, but I'm not currently like a lecturer at Berkeley or anything like that right now. Do you feel that there is enough emphasis on teaching entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial skills, and technique in journalism schools? Yes and no. I mean, I think more and more journalism schools are doing that, but I think the best experiences are getting your hands dirty, and I think journalism schools need to create the platforms by which journalists can get their hands dirty in trying new things. During my research and in talking to my own professors, I've met both love and hate for the idea of blogging as a means for young journalists to get a foot in the door. What are your views on blogging and what it has done and can do for journalism entrepreneurship? So in terms of blogging, I mean, it's the same as, having a Facebook page or having a Twitter account or something like that. It is a way to live a part of your life online, but it's the most flexible part of your life online, right? Like if you get a Twitter account, your tweets will be unique, but you have the same Twitter account that everybody else has. And Twitter owns it, right? Twitter owns, in the end, if Twitter shuts down, you've lost everything. Same with Facebook, right? Owning your own URL is like buying a house. It is yours. You own that URL, and you can do anything or nothing with it. And that is the most valuable real estate online that you can have, right? Because it is not subject to any other company. It is yours. And then, blogging on it, again, that is completely yours. It is up to you, and it is much more flexible, and there is more of a statement you can make about yourself through a blog than you can, in some respects, via Twitter and Facebook. Just something to think about. Jeff Jarvis, who I know you have worked closely with, has said, the future is entrepreneurial, not institutional. Do you agree? What does the future of entrepreneurialism look like? What can you tell me about what you are doing right now? Right now, I am at the Circa office. I'm in the sort of conference room, and I'm just working on Circa, putting the stories out, editing, things like that. In terms of the future is entrepreneurial, not institutional, I do think that there is a great bit of wisdom in that. I think I also gave you a quote earlier that when I was visiting Reno from Lisa Williams, who I also admire, and she says, journalism will survive the death of its institutions, which is, again, related to this idea of, there's institutions, and they come and they go. And, the life of an institution is not even necessarily quick, right? I mean, the whole point of becoming an institution is that it is solidifying itself. So I'm not saying that institutions are flying by night, right? But all things fade, right? All institutions, go through drastic changes to the point where they don't even look like themselves anymore. I think certainly journalism is going through a lot of changing times, and so I do think that there's an aspect of truth to what Jeff Jarvis is saying. As for what the future of entrepreneur journalism looks like, I honestly wouldn't know. I think there's a lot of different things, but I see I've gotten up to 15 minutes, which is pretty long, so I'm going to cut it here. And if you have any other questions, let me know.